I've always been fascinated with world design and world building. It's always been a dream of mine to fully flesh out a world of my own. So when Artifactian began uploading a YouTube series on this subject, it became one of my favorite videos to watch. When he moved from 2D into 3D, attempting to learn Blender, I was happy to give advice. After a bit of contact, he asked if I could make an animation, and I was happy to provide some help. That being said, I wanted to spread how to make this animation so that people in the future can do it themselves. While this is a pretty simple project, I am going to be using hotkeys since learning hotkeys in Blender will make your workflow move so much faster. That being said, let's move on to Blender. So now that we've opened up Blender, first thing we're going to do is click on the cube and delete it. Then we are going to press Shift A to open the Add menu, go to Mesh and UV Sphere. Now, to get the look that we want, we are going to go to Render, change the render engine to Cycles, and then change the feature set to Experimental. We're going to do that because we're going to add the subdivision surface modifier and click Adaptive Subdivision. This will basically make it so that the amount, it will subdivide the sphere as much as what is needed. So we're going to go up to Object and then click Shade Smooth. And there you've got your planet. Now we're going to go under the Shading tab. So we're going to create a new material. Let's name it Globe Mat. And we're going to need a base map, which I'm just dragging and dropping from my file explorer to this area. We are going to drag the color into the base color. Then we will need a height map, which is a black and white image where your highest points are going to be white and your lowest points are going to be black. As you can see if I plug this into the base color. Now I will also use this height map to make the water slightly less reflective, or slightly more reflective than the land. So how we're going to do that is if we hover over this tile, I'm going to Shift A once again, go under Converter and Color Ramp. Now we're going to want to change this to constant. And we're going to adjust this until we can see there's a line between the land and the water. So I found for this image, 0.2 works. And you can check by zooming in and plugging this back in And you can see that the white is on the land and the black is on the water. So we're going to plug this into roughness and plug this into base color. And then if we hover over this, press Z and go to render, you can see that little dot is our light source, this one. However, we want it slightly more rough than that. I have found that a good color is if we select the black, we click on here, and then under value, I found that for this map, 0.3 works for the water, and for the land, I found a 0.5 works. Now, we are going to create we're going to add the bumps to it. So if you press Shift A, this time we're going to go to search and type displacement. We're going to plug the height map into height and plug displacement into displacement. Now you can see that it is making it look like it's 3D, but if you look at the edges, it's still 2D. So if we click on the globe and we go to material and we go down to settings, change under surface, change bump only to displacement only. Now this is a bit crazy, so let us adjust a couple of these settings. What I found works is 0.05 for a scale, and we can keep mid-level to 0.5. Your maps may be different. Now this is still a little low resolution, so what you can do is change, go to modifiers, and you can change this value. Now be careful, because this is going to make your computer sweat. Something you can notice is you have final scale, render 1 pixel, viewpoint 8 pixels. So basically, Blender will automatically reduce the resolution in this screen. So your final render will be higher resolution. For example, if I put this to 0.1, you can see it looks good, but our viewpoint is 0.8 and our render is 0.1. So since I like this amount of detail, I can put this up to 0.8, or I ended up putting it to 0.5. And I know when it renders, it will be the resolution I want. Now, this map that was given to me, I wanted to add a little bit more detail to the oceans. So what I did is I added a curves. This is optional, but this allows you to play with the settings. So I ended up adding 2 points. The first one was at 0.2, and the second one was at 0.53. Or sorry, these coordinates. The second point I had at 0.67 and 0.66. So if I once again change this down to 0.1, you can see it adds a lot more definition. If you click on the RGB curves, you can press M, oops, and that will mute it. So you can see the difference. Bring this back to 0.5. So I will now we want to tilt the earth. So going back to layout, I want to add Shift A and add an empty plane axis. We can scale it up just so that we can see it. So click the earth and then Shift click the empty. Now, if you hold Control P, then you can set a parent to the object. This will mean, if I go into Material Preview, by rotating the empty, we can rotate the globe. So for this, if I press N, I can go to Item, and you can see the rotations here. For this one, I clicked on Y and I set it to 21. But you can put this at whatever angle your Earth or your planet is going to be. Keep in mind, you may want to look at how the rotation is. So, for example, you may prefer at negative. To animate this, we're going to click on the Earth this time, hover over rotation and Z, and press I. This is going to add a keyframe. Then we are going to move our timeline to the end, 250, and we're going to type under Z 360 and press I again. Now if we move back to 0 and press space to play, you can see that it will rotate a full 360 degrees. Now if we want a looping animation, we don't want that slow start and end. So if I pause it once again, go back to 0. Hovering on the border and pulling up, we will then click this little clock and go to Graph Editor. If you zoom out, you can see it's very tall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the scroll bar and pull it up. So with everything selected, right click, interpolation mode, and go to linear. So if we press space once again, we can see there is no startup or end. Once again, going into rendered view, we can see this is our current animation. So now we want a background. So we are once again going into shader mode. Remembering to put my screencast on now. We are going to go down to the shader view, and over here under object, click world. Then this use no should be selected. So if you press home, it will make all the nodes visible. So if I get really large and move off screen and I can't find it anymore, I can press home and it'll bring you right back here. So I have an image that I'm going to use. It is a star map of the Milky Way that I downloaded from NASA, or NASA's website. I'll put it in the description. You can download it for free. I drag and drop it in here. Now if we go over to this, we can go down and click it, and you can see this is a large image, and it's also panoramic, which means that it connects. So if I plug this into color, oh, I apologize. You want to press Shift A, texture, environment, texture. Now if we go under here, we can now click star map, delete this, and plug this into color. And you can see we now have a background. To set our camera up, let's go back to layout. And we are going to scroll out, click our camera, pressing N to go back into our item. Let's turn the X to 0 and the Y to 0. Now change the X rotation to 90 and the Z rotation to 0. If we press numpad 0, we can enter a view of our planet. And in holding Z, we can go to rendered. Now this is not the lighting that we would like. So coming out of this view, we are going to click on our light, go to this little bulb and click sun. Now this is a little too bright, so I want to change it to 1.2, and I am going to, if I click and drag on these values, I can select each of them, pressing 0, and then for Y I will set to 90, pressing numpad 0 again. You can see that we've got a more a light closer to what we want. Now, I wanted a little bit more of the front to be showing, so I rotated this 10 degrees along the X. You can rotate more if you want, or less. So if I put this in here, you can see, if I set this back to 0, it shows less. So one more thing, if we want to change what's behind the background, we can once again go to shading. Clicking on star map, we can do Shift A once again, go to search, mapping, plug the vector into the vector, and Shift A, texture coordinate. Now drag generated into vector. Now if I go here, press numpad 0 once again, and move the rotation around the Z, I can choose what is going to be behind my planet. So for this scene, I decided -143 degrees. That puts just a little bit of the star cluster behind. And that should be your scene. If I go back to layout, and spin, you can see this is going to be what we get. Now to render, I will press F12. Oh, a note, this is going to take a lot of time. So to quicken it, you can go back to render. Under render samples, you can turn this down to 128, 256. That is what I went with. This will make it way quicker. Just make sure this denoise option is on. So once again, pressing F12. So now that we've seen this is what we want, you can close this. Now we can render our full animation. To do that, we are going to click output. Now you're going to want to put output to wherever you want it to be saved. You're going to want to change this. If you put it to PNG, it is going to render a single image for each of your frames. Otherwise, you can set it to FFmpeg video, and then under encoding, you can click MPEG4. Make sure this is all set. Then press Ctrl F12 and you can render. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and I hope you can show your worlds in better detail. Signing off.